Would you believe me if I told you that there is a psychiatric and spiritual condition in the DSM known as possession form dissociation? Would you believe me if I said that that was in the DSM? Would you doubt the legitimacy of this diagnosis because it feels so far away from reality? It seems incomprehensible, unfathomable. Would you believe that somebody's experience in the world, culturally, religiously, whatever it may be, their experience is that of possession form dissociation? Do you know what that is? Well, in today's video, I'm going to strive to answer all of those questions the best that I can. Lately, we've been talking a lot about dissociation. And part of that is because I'm now going back to my roots, which is trauma-informed care. And a lot of you respond really well to my videos about trauma. And so I figured this would fit perfectly in our discussion about dissociation, traumatic experiences within your family, and some of the difficult periods that you may find yourself in certain relationships. So let's not delay any further. Let me go ahead and introduce myself to those of you who are new. My name is Tamra, and I'm an internationally and board certified trauma therapist. I'm also licensed in mental health, and I specialize in treating children, teens, and families, as well as adults who are dealing with trauma. Let's go ahead and jump in. Possession form dissociation is a complicated diagnosis. The field of psychology separated from religion many years ago for many reasons, and it was really difficult to try to incorporate any kind of religious principles into psychology at a certain period. I can't even remember anywhere in my 10-year, I'm going to say 9.5 years of higher education, I can't remember being taught about this anywhere, that there is often some rejection of the other in one of the fields. So, for example, there is psychology that's rejecting religion because of how it functions. There is religion objecting psychology because of how it functions. And so they both reject each other. And unfortunately, that has kind of left us as professionals scraping for information and trying to integrate both fields when we need to try to understand those people who get lost in the middle, those people who are in the gray of everything, and our clinical tools, our science, our clinical experiences cannot touch, right? So there are cases that I've seen where I'm like, this just doesn't match the clinical criteria that I'm used to. And so then it forces me to have to step outside of the comfort zone that I'm used to. And it forces me to have to step outside of the field to get information that's a little less clinical. There's a lot to the field of psychology that is wonderful. And there's a lot to the field of psychology and religion that could be wonderful if they both came together. But unfortunately, they are opposed. And so that kind of causes, us to, again, cross the lines and say, okay, I need that information, but keep the rest of that over there, right? So the mismatch between psychology and religion has really created a strain on the field. And one of the biggest strains is that we don't understand the religious and spiritual and existential components as well as we should, which is why psychotherapists like myself say, you know what, clinical tools are great, but there's a spiritual side of life, and we need to incorporate that as well. We don't need to push it out of the way so that we can create our own black and white world. We need to be embracing the gray so that we can get the knowledge, the true knowledge and the true skills, and give people the true help that is needed. Someone like me who is into spirituality and existentialism, and I have a Christian background, all of that works together to help me understand those cases that science just can't touch, But then I go to my field and I say, you know what, I really appreciate all the research we've done and all the clinical studies that have been done, and just how, educated and smart some professionals are, how dedicated, all of that matters. But unfortunately, in certain parts of the world, and even in our nation, in the United States, and, even in my own town, there's this resistance when it comes to religion and spirituality, and that's what gets in the way. Well, I must say, there's something revolutionary in a sense about the DSM-5, including possession form dissociation. And here's why. Religion and psychology broke apart. Religion and demonology broke apart or separated, I should say, because they couldn't agree. They couldn't really mesh the two. But what the DSM-5 is trying to do is say, wait a minute, there's this other stuff going on in certain cultures that we need to try to adjust to. And so that adjustment means including this diagnosis right here, or I'm going to actually I'll put it over here. This diagnosis right here is what we need to be focusing on. And so possession form dissociation is basically the idea that there has been a temporary removal of the actual person and something else has stepped into this person. It's similar to dissociative identity disorder in that it's a different person that has taken over. It's a different eye contact. It's a different mood, personality, which I'm going to get into in a little bit here. But, the individual goes somewhere. And so there's this new person involved. And so, or this new deity or entity or ghost, as the DSM-5 puts it, and it changes the scope of things. It also changes the clinical measures that we use, because you can't counsel something that you don't necessarily fully understand. And so possession form dissociation is really highlighting that there are certain cultures where possession of the human or possession of the being of a person can happen. Possession form dissociation is unwanted. It's involuntary. You can't just say, come on, change. It's involuntary. It causes substantial distress, right? Because think about it. If something, if you leave who you are and you lose touch with your identity and something else steps in and controls your life, right? Then you have to kind of wonder, what is it making me say? What is it making me think? What is it making me do? And in possession form dissociation, there's no better way to describe the behavioral change, the attitude change, the eye contact change, the tone of voice change, right? It's similar to dissociative identity disorder, but in possession form dissociation, we're dealing with a completely different being here, okay? And so, this possession form dissociation violates the cultural and religious norms of that person's culture, of that person's environment. The first thing that you're likely to see in a person with possession form dissociation is quite a few things that you see in DID, and that's depersonalization. Depersonalization is the idea that you are walking in a dreamlike stage, that, everywhere that you go, it just kind of feels unreal. Looking at a person across the street looks unreal to you. Kind of watching yourself from above or being outside of yourself and observing yourself as the observer is kind of odd. It feels weird. It feels like you are just not a participant, but rather an observer. It just feels like, you're not attached to the world around you. Derealization is another thing that you probably will see in possession form dissociation. And again, that's like this unreality, right? There's this detachment with reality. You're like walking in a dream, walking in a daze, walking in a cloud, right? It almost feels like you're sitting on the couch watching yourself on TV kind of feeling, There's also identity confusion, and then there's also identity alteration. And I usually put those two things together because the alteration and the identity confusion is so drastic that everybody else sees it. It's not something where, like I said in the last two videos that I did, where, sometimes somebody with DID can transform in front of me and I not even notice it. But with possession form dissociation, you're going to notice it. It is really out there. You know, a lot of clients that I have had have mentioned this as a concern, and they've wanted to know, is this a real thing? And you know, I've had to explain very carefully that, you know, I'm not saying that your child or you are demon possessed, but rather that there are different cultures who, you know, believe, and religions who believe that possession form dissociation actually occurs. It's a possession. It's a taking over of the person that you know them to be. And so it's almost like they have completely been removed from who they are. And it's not just a different person, it's a deity, it's a ghost, it's a spirit, according to the DSM. For my religion, for my for my religious background, because I'm not a fan of religion in terms of its organization and all of that political stuff. But in terms of my spiritual background and my religious background, my Christian background, it would be a demon that would take you over, or a spirit, or an entity. And so there are certain cultures, again, and religions that believe in this. And so, you know, it's really hard to have that conversation with certain people that, you know, maybe this is what you're seeing. Now, if a client, for example, comes to me and says, you know, I really think something spiritual is going on, then that's when I will jump in and say, okay, well, here's where the DSM kind of points to this. Tell me if this is what you're seeing. But it's a really, you know, you have to be really careful, and you have to walk that tightrope really well. You may be wondering, how do I know that this is possession form dissociation? Well, I think the first thing that you want to look for is daydreaming and zoning out. You also want to look for extreme behavioral change, right? You know, this is not a person saying that they're Tommy or that they're Kayla. This is a person who's saying that they are possessed with a spirit, a demon, something that has taken control of their being, you know? You also want to look at vocal changes, eye contact change, like it's a complete eye contact change. Like, this is not, he's looking at me weird. This is, ooh, that's a different person in there. Okay, that's what I mean by that. You know, some people who believe in this possession form dissociation, they report things like, you know, there was a different presence in the environment and I just felt chills, the hair on my arm stood up, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. This was a really drastic shift in character, and I'm not used to this. So you will hear these things from people, maybe friends, family, maybe coworkers, who truly do believe in possession or believe in possession form dissociation. Is this something that you are likely to walk in a clinic and get a diagnosis of? Most likely not. I think the field of psychology and the field of religion and demonology, I think they've gotten so sophisticated that they understand that there is mental illness, there's mental health, there's trauma, you know. So they know how to put all of that in the mix and then figure things out from there. So it's not like you're going to walk into a clinic and get possession form dissociation as a diagnosis. You're most likely going to be diagnosed with DID, dissociative identity disorder, or some kind of dissociative amnesia or something like that. And then if things begin to, you know, to regress, I guess I should say, in a bad way, then you might find yourself getting that diagnosis. Most of the time, you're probably going to hear possession form dissociation occur in religious settings, right? So in churches, in Christian clinics or private practices, things like that. So just keep that in mind. It's centralized to religion and culture, you know, and how different cultures and religions view this. So I don't want you to walk away from the video and feel like, oh my God, I'm going to get that diagnosis. I think we're very careful when it comes to that. Let me know what you think of this topic in the comment section below. I know it's pretty controversial. It's really hard to grasp, but I think you need to know that this is kind of what we're working with in the field. So thank you so much for being with me in today's video. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and like button and that bell button if you want to stick around and get more videos. Every time you hit that button, you're going to get notified every time I post something new. So go ahead and hit that button. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.